I'm Dr. Caelum Derux, and this is Think Hack, Better Living Through Psychology. Today's talk is about something every man needs but few ever master: emotional control in the face of feminine chaos. It's one thing to keep your cool when things are peaceful. It's another to stay calm when you're being tested, misunderstood, accused, ignored, or emotionally baited by the very woman you're trying to connect with. And this isn't about suppressing who you are to win a relationship. This is about understanding how emotional self-respect, when weaponized properly, can be your greatest ally in navigating female psychology. The method I want to share with you today is something I call the sandwich strategy. Simple on the surface, subtle in application, powerful in its results. If you've ever lost your temper, felt guilty for speaking your truth, or froze during conflict with a woman, this one's for you. Before we get into tactics, let's establish the battlefield. The average man is not taught how to deal with emotionally charged situations. He's told to be a man, but never told what that actually means in the context of relationship dynamics. So what happens? He either explodes, becomes a doormat, or emotionally shuts down. None of these are strength. None of these create safety. None of these keep a woman attracted. Women don't test you for sport. They test you for security. And when you fail that test, she doesn't feel safe. And when she doesn't feel safe, she pulls away, physically, emotionally, sexually. So keeping your cool isn't about looking tough or being cold. It's about being unshakable. It's about having a center so strong that no storm can drag you out of alignment. And the key to that kind of calm, it lies in the three-layered formula of the sandwich strategy. But before we break it down, let's understand why it works. You need to understand something most men never learn. When a woman becomes emotional, dramatic, or irrational, it's not about logic. It's about testing the strength of your presence. It's primal, subconscious. She doesn't even realize she's doing it, but her nervous system is asking, can I lean on this man? Can I push him and still feel safe? Can I unravel and know he won't run, break, or collapse? If you meet her emotional chaos with more chaos, you fail the test. If you become overly accommodating or apologetic just to stop the waves, you fail the test. But if you stand firm, grounded, calm, like an oak tree in a hurricane, that's when she relaxes. That's when she feels trust. That's when attraction deepens. The sandwich strategy gives you a framework to embody that unshakable masculine core without losing your authenticity. It lets you express boundaries without becoming cold. It lets you correct her behavior without losing her respect. It lets you stay human, but in control. So what is the sandwich strategy? At its core, it's a communication technique built on emotional pacing. You deliver your message in three parts: calm affirmation, firm correction, and warm reassurance. That's the sandwich. The first layer is emotional grounding. You start with a calm, non-reactive tone that affirms presence, not approval. It sounds like, look, I'm not mad, I care about us, and I want this to work. This immediately disarms the emotional defense and creates safety. The second layer is direct, masculine truth. This is the core of the sandwich. It's where you calmly but firmly lay down your boundary or call out the behavior that crossed the line. You say, but I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected, spoken to like that, or treated like an afterthought. You don't yell, you don't insult, you just state your truth like a man who's used to being respected. The final layer is emotional warmth. Something like, we all have bad days, I just need you to come to me with respect. When you do, I'll always listen. That's the sandwich. Safety, strength, then softness. Why does this work? Because it aligns with the natural rhythm of feminine emotionality. Women crave polarity. They want a man who can hold the tension without collapsing or punishing them for it. When you lead with warmth, assert with strength, and close with reassurance, you give her the emotional security she didn't even know she was asking for. You're not punishing her for being emotional. You're not abandoning her. You're leading her through it. And that's what she wants. That's what earns you respect, not just love. The sandwich strategy is less about fixing the problem and more about holding the frame, creating a psychological container where emotions can move without destroying the relationship. It's what separates reactive boys from grounded men. And it's what gives you the ability to walk through conflict, not with fear or aggression, but with masculine command. That's what keeping your cool looks like. and we're just getting started. Now let's be clear about something. Keeping your cool doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means channeling your emotions through a lens of deliberate expression. There's a difference between being calm and being passive. One is strength, the other is weakness in disguise. Most men confuse silence with stoicism, thinking that shutting down during conflict makes them powerful. But true power isn't silence, it's precision. It's the ability to speak truth without trembling. It's the ability to confront chaos without losing composure. And that requires emotional training. It requires you to stop viewing feminine storms as threats and start viewing them as calls for leadership. When a woman loses her emotional center, she doesn't need a savior. She needs a man who won't lose his. That's the deeper purpose of the sandwich strategy. It's not just a tool for conflict resolution, it's a ritual of grounded masculine leadership in moments of emotional volatility. Let's walk through a real example. Imagine your woman lashes out, accuses you of not caring, maybe even says something disrespectful. Your old self might react with anger or walk away. But with the sandwich strategy, you slow your breath. You meet her eyes, not with heat, but with calm intensity. You say, "Look, I know you're upset. I care about you. I want to talk this through." That's the first slice of bread grounding. Then comes the core. "But the way you just spoke to me, that's not going to fly. I deserve respect, even when you're mad. If we're going to solve this, that can't happen again." That's the truth. Sharp, steady, unapologetic. And then the second slice, "We can get through this, but I need you on my side, not attacking me. When you come to me with openness, you'll always get my presence. But not like this." And you let it land. You let the silence do its work. No yelling, no caving, just command. And what she feels isn't domination, it's containment, it's security. That's where respect begins. The biggest mistake men make when communicating with women is trying to win the argument instead of leading the emotional tone. You can win the logic battle and still lose her heart. Why? Because women don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. If she feels dismissed, overpowered, or emotionally abandoned, she'll shut down. But if she feels heard, held, and corrected without hostility, she'll respect you even when she disagrees. That's why the sandwich strategy isn't about being right, it's about being clear and composed. You don't have to justify your boundaries. You don't need 10 examples to prove your point. One clean sentence delivered with grounded calm is worth more than a 5-minute emotional monologue. When she sees that you can stay centered under pressure, she trusts you more. And when she trusts you, she opens. Not because you controlled her, but because you anchored her. That's the quiet superpower of emotional leadership. But let's not sugarcoat it. This isn't easy, especially if you've spent most of your life walking on eggshells. Especially if you've been taught that your worth depends on pleasing women or avoiding conflict. When you first start using the sandwich strategy, it might feel unnatural. Your voice might shake, your heart might race. You might feel a wave of guilt for asserting your needs. That's normal. You're rewiring your nervous system. You're unlearning decades of conditioning that taught you to trade truth for approval. But here's what you'll discover. Every time you speak your truth without aggression, your self-respect grows. Every time you maintain your frame in the fire of feminine emotion, your power compounds. And eventually, you'll stop fearing emotional conflict. You'll stop shrinking in the face of feminine intensity. You'll start seeing it as the arena where your masculinity sharpens itself. Not through domination, not through detachment, but through quiet, grounded, decisive strength. Here's something that will change your life if you really hear it. Women don't fall in love with perfection. They fall in love with presence. And presence isn't about always knowing the right thing to say. It's about being there, fully, calmly, without escaping into defense or shutting down. When you use the sandwich strategy, you're not trying to manipulate her emotions. You're creating emotional alignment. You're saying, "I'm here. I see you. I won't collapse. But I also won't tolerate being disrespected." That message, when delivered consistently, creates a new dynamic. One where she feels safe being emotional without weaponizing it. One where you feel safe expressing boundaries without guilt. That's a relationship worth having. That's masculine-feminine polarity done right. And the man who masters this, he doesn't just keep his cool, he becomes the temperature in the room. He doesn't get pushed around by feminine chaos. He becomes the gravity that organizes it. That's not theory. That's power in practice. One of the hidden benefits of using the sandwich strategy consistently is that it teaches both of you how to navigate conflict without escalation. You're not just modeling emotional strength, you're training her nervous system to associate your presence with stability. Over time, this rewires the entire relationship dynamic. Instead of fearing conflict, she begins to trust that even the messy parts of your connection can be worked through without breakdowns. She doesn't feel like she has to scream to be heard, and you don't feel like you have to defend yourself just to maintain respect. This creates emotional safety, not the soft, smothering kind, but the kind built on boundaries, clarity, and mutual accountability. And here's the kicker: the calmer you are in moments of tension, the more she'll mirror that calm back to you. Not immediately, but eventually. Because when you stop reacting to her emotional spikes, she no longer has to spike to feel seen. Your stillness becomes her mirror. And that's the kind of peace most men never experience. Let's talk about resistance, because yes, there will be pushback. Especially if you're stepping into this strategy for the first time with a woman who's used to you being passive, overly agreeable, or emotionally unavailable. The first time you lay down a boundary with calm conviction, she might test harder. She might accuse you of being cold. She might try to guilt you, pull away, or escalate. This isn't manipulation, it's adaptation. She's recalibrating to the new version of you. And in that recalibration, she's trying to figure out, is this real? Will he hold? Can I still trust his warmth if he also carries a sword? And that's your moment, not to fold, not to attack, but to remain composed. That's when you double down on the sandwich, calm, firm, warm, again and again, until it becomes the new normal, until she realizes that your calm isn't conditional, it's who you are. That your boundaries aren't punishments, they're invitations to higher connection. That your strength isn't a mask, it's your center. The beauty of the sandwich strategy is that it doesn't require her to change in order for you to feel peace. It begins with you. It begins with your decision to lead the emotional tone, no matter what's thrown your way. You don't need her to be calm for you to stay calm. You don't need her to agree for you to speak your truth. You don't need her to validate your boundaries for them to matter. And when you embody that level of emotional independence, something extraordinary happens. She stops trying to control you. Why? Because she senses, consciously or unconsciously, that you're not controllable. Not in the reactive, prideful way, but in the calm, internally validated way. That's what feminine energy craves at its core. A man who doesn't get pulled off center just because the emotional weather changes. When you become that man, you don't just gain respect, you gain freedom. Freedom from emotional roller coasters, freedom from manipulation, freedom from needing her mood to determine your own. There's a deeper layer to this that most men never see. When you consistently lead with a sandwich strategy, you're not just improving communication, you're building emotional intimacy. Real intimacy isn't built in peaceful moments. It's built in tense moments, in hard conversations, in emotional misfires. And most couples sabotage that opportunity because they go into fight or flight. But when you hold the frame, when you stay grounded, honest, and warm all at once, you teach her that your love doesn't vanish when she gets emotional. You teach her that her storms don't scare you, and the message that sends is powerful. I can handle all of you, not just your sunshine. That's when a woman opens in ways she never has before. That's when her walls come down. That's when trust becomes bond. And that bond, it's not built on fantasy. It's built on fire-tested truth, on the knowing that you can go to war with the world and still come home to peace. But don't mistake peace for passivity. There will be moments where you have to walk away, not in silence, not in punishment, but in firm self-respect. The sandwich strategy isn't about tolerating endless drama. It's about giving clear chances for connection and then removing access when that connection is repeatedly violated. You say, I've told you calmly, I've told you clearly, I care about this, but I won't keep doing this dance. I need space now, and you mean it. No chasing, no convincing, just stillness. And if she's emotionally mature, she'll come back grounded. If she's not, she won't. Either way, you win, because you stay true to yourself. That's the final gift of this strategy. It gives you clarity. It shows you who's ready for emotional depth and who's addicted to emotional chaos. And for a man who values his time, his peace, and his mission, there is no greater filter than that. In long-term relationships, this strategy becomes your quiet form of leadership. The honeymoon phase fades, real life sets in. Tension builds not because something's wrong, but because two human beings are coexisting with their own triggers, past wounds, and patterns. That's where most men lose the plot. They try to fix her feelings instead of holding space for them. They try to buy peace instead of earning it through presence. But if you stay consistent with the sandwich strategy, you give her something rare, predictable emotional stability. She knows what she's going to get from you in tough moments, not explosions, not withdrawal, but clarity. And clarity is what breeds safety. You're not reacting to her emotions, you're responding to her truth. You're not letting her chaos create yours. You're showing her, day by day, that you're the kind of man who doesn't just love during the good times, you lead during the hard ones. That kind of presence becomes irresistible over time because it's so rare, so misunderstood, and so needed. Let's talk about sexual polarity, because here's where most men miss the mark. They think emotional control means stoicism, blankness, being cold, but nothing kills attraction faster than a man who turns into a wall. Women don't want walls, they want anchors. A wall blocks, but an anchor holds. A wall is unmovable, but dead. An anchor is solid, but alive. When you use the sandwich strategy correctly, you don't shut her out. You invite her in, just through a filter of truth and self-respect. You're not withholding affection, you're guiding connection. And that makes her feel not only seen, but led. You show her that you can handle her body because you've already proven you can handle her emotions. And that makes her melt, not because you caved, but because you stayed. Calm, grounded, decisive. That's what allows her to relax into her feminine. That's what unlocks the polarity again. And that's what keeps attraction alive far beyond the first few months. Now, let's flip the script. What happens when you're the one feeling emotional? When you've been disrespected, dismissed, or overwhelmed, but you still want to lead with strength? That's when the sandwich strategy becomes a tool, not just for communication, but for self-regulation. You do the same 3 steps, but with yourself. You start with grounding, I'm upset, and that's okay. My feelings are valid. Then the truth. What she just did crossed the line, and I'm not okay with it. Then the reassurance, but I don't need to yell. I don't need to collapse. I can express myself with strength and still stay calm. This internal dialogue trains your nervous system to respond instead of react. It keeps you from saying things you'll regret, and it reminds you that the real alpha move isn't dominance, it's composure. That's what makes the sandwich strategy so powerful. It's not just a method, it's a mindset, a lens, a way of moving through relationships without losing yourself. One of the greatest misconceptions in male circles is that emotional calm means being unaffected. That's not true. If you care deeply, you're going to feel deeply. You're going to get triggered, disappointed. That's not weakness, that's being alive. The question isn't whether emotions arise. The question is what you do with them. Do you leak them out as aggression? Do you swallow them into silence? Or do you channel them into clean, masculine expression? That's what the sandwich strategy teaches you. It gives your emotion structure. It gives your truth a delivery system. And that delivery is everything. Because in relationships, it's rarely the content that creates damage, it's the tone. When your tone is calm, clear, and firm, you can say almost anything. And when your tone is erratic, insecure, or volatile, even truth becomes a weapon. So if you want to be a man whose presence is felt, whose words carry weight, and whose boundaries are respected, it starts with the delivery. That's where your real power lives. Let's end this section with a truth. Most men never hear, being cool under pressure isn't a trait you're born with, it's a skill you build. And like all skills, it comes from practice, from repetition, from failing and trying again. There will be moments you get it wrong. You'll raise your voice, you'll fold, you'll freeze, and that's okay. Because every time you come back to the sandwich strategy, every time you choose calm clarity over chaos, you're building a new identity. You're becoming the kind of man who doesn't just know what he wants, he knows how to hold it. You're not just reacting to your woman, you're leading the relationship. And leadership isn't about control, it's about direction. It's about setting the emotional tone, holding the standard, and moving forward together. That's what keeps your cool. That's what earns respect. And that's what turns you into the kind of man women don't just want, but feel safe surrendering to. As your composure deepens, you'll start to see the ripple effects in all areas of your life. You'll argue less, because arguments require emotional chaos, and you're not giving that anymore. You'll attract different kinds of women too, ones who are drawn to your calm instead of trying to create storms to test you. And even if you're in a relationship now, you'll feel the entire dynamic shift. She won't push as hard, because you're no longer a wall or a mirror. You're the ground beneath her feet, the one she can count on to stay still even when her world shakes. That steadiness is sexy, it's magnetic, and more importantly, it's rare. In a world where everyone's reactive, your non-reactivity becomes your power. And this isn't about being emotionally numb, it's about being emotionally anchored. You feel everything, you process it, but you never let it own you. That's what keeps your cool alive, not as a trick, but as a truth. Eventually she'll notice something. Nothing she does can pull you out of your center. Not because you're indifferent, but because you're deeply aligned with who you are. You don't flinch when she cries. You don't rage when she attacks. You don't apologize for things you didn't do just to keep the peace. You hold, you breathe, you speak, you stay. And that presence becomes the very thing she clings to when the world overwhelms her. That's what the feminine really wants. Someone who can hold the emotional fire without trying to put it out too quickly. Someone who doesn't run when it gets hot. Someone who knows that conflict isn't always a threat, it's sometimes a test. And when you pass that test, when you stay grounded, loving and firm, she sees the one thing she didn't even know she was looking for, a man she can trust with her deepest chaos. That's the foundation of unshakable connection. That's how you stop fighting, by never needing to win the fight in the first place. This is the paradox most men miss. The greatest victory in any relationship isn't domination. It's not even compromise. It's emotional leadership without control. It's holding space for another human being's experience without collapsing or taking it personally. The sandwich strategy doesn't win arguments. It disarms them. It dissolves tension before it turns into destruction. It teaches her, through your behavior, that there's a better way to love. A way that doesn't require screaming, silence, or games. Just presence, just truth, just calm. When you stop reacting and start responding, the power dynamic shifts. You're no longer at the mercy of her moods, you're guiding them. And in that leadership, you invite her into something better. You don't shame her for her emotions, you give them a place to land. And when that happens consistently, the whole relationship evolves, not by force, but by example. That's real masculine influence. That's how the greatest victory requires no battle. The sandwich strategy, in the end, is just a vehicle. What matters most is the man behind it. You can't fake calm. You can't pretend to be grounded. You have to become the kind of man who doesn't get rattled by emotion, who doesn't need to punish to feel powerful, and who doesn't seek validation through being right. That's the real work. Becoming a man whose emotional presence is a gift, not a burden. A man whose strength isn't a performance, but a posture. A man who's seen his own darkness, made peace with it, and can now hold space for someone else's. That's why this strategy works, because it's not just about what you say, it's about who you are when you say it. The more grounded you become, the more your words carry weight, and the less you need to raise your voice to be heard. That's what real cool looks like. That's what keeps women close, not because they fear your wrath, but because they trust your presence. So the next time you feel the tension rising, pause, breathe, remember the structure, ground her with calm, speak your truth with clarity, reassure with warmth, and do it not as a tactic, but as a reflection of who you've become. A man who doesn't run from conflict, but doesn't chase it either. A man who leads with emotional integrity. A man who understands that the greatest fights aren't won through war, but through weathering the storm without ever letting go of his peace. That's the sandwich strategy. That's what it means to keep your cool with women, not by being distant, not by being dominant, but by being so grounded in your value that no mood, no word, and no storm can ever take that from you. You're not here to fight, you're here to lead. And that's what separates the boys from the men, and the men from the anchors.